From extreme poverty and high crime rates to gang activity and violence, these projects have become synonymous with the systematic failures and social struggles that persist in disadvantaged neighborhoods. The history of public housing in the United States is marked by a range of projects that have faced significant challenges and garnered notoriety for their adverse conditions. Let's delve into the history and struggles of these 5 projects, examining the factors that contributed to their notoriety and their implications for their residents. The US government started funding federal public housing during the Great Depression. Government created public housing in 1937 to help people during the Great Depression. It was part of a bigger plan called the New Deal, which was made by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Public housing became more common in 1937. FDR made the Housing Act a law. The law was made to help state and local governments build public housing by giving them money. This new law caused a big increase in building public housing projects. In just 1 year, 1939, 50,000 homes were built. Public housing was created to provide a better living option for poor people, but unfortunately, gangs started using these buildings to sell and store drugs and guns. In the 1990s, people found out that public housing projects were in really bad shape. This became a big problem that politicians started to pay attention to. Bad groups would scare people who lived in public housing and made them hide their drugs and guns. Gang members often used high floors and rooftops of public housing buildings to keep watch for police. Gang members would use walkie-talkies to tell other gang members when they saw police officers. Gangs were able to sell drugs all the time in public housing projects. Drug dealers and gang members would use elevators to sell drugs. They would choose the floor based on what drug the buyer wanted. Jordan Downs is a housing project with a complex and troubled history. Initially constructed in 1944 to accommodate white war workers, it underwent a significant transformation over years. By the 1960s, it had become a public housing complex, predominantly occupied by black residents. Unfortunately, this shift marked the beginning of a period characterized by immense challenges and hardships for the community. One of the most persisting issues faced by Jordan Downs was extreme poverty. Many residents struggled to make ends meet, with high unemployment rates and reliance on welfare programs. The project's location in high crime areas further exacerbated difficulties faced by its inhabitants. Gang activity became prevalent, contributing to a sense of insecurity and fear within the community. Jordan Downs' reputation and struggles have been reflected in popular culture. The project has been featured in films and video games, serving as a backdrop for narratives centered around crime and social issues. Its portrayal has often depicted the harsh reality faced by residents. However, there is hope for change on the horizon. Jordan Downs is currently undergoing a significant transformation. The old housing units are being replaced by new apartments, signaling an effort to improve the living conditions for its residents. This redevelopment project aims to address the issues that have plagued the community for decades, create a more favorable environment for the residents. Number 2, the Marcy Houses, also known as the Marcy Projects, are in Brooklyn, New York. They have 27 buildings that are 6 stories tall. The project was finished in 1949 and has 1,705 apartments. The Trinitarius gang is often linked to the Marcy Houses in New York and is well known for their criminal activities. The Dominican-American gang by 2 Dominican prisoners named Leonidas Sierra and Julio Marie, while they were in jail on Rikers Island. The Trinitarius started in the Marcy Houses and then grew to other areas in New York and Long Island. According to the New York Times, the gang was famous for using machetes instead of guns when they attacked. Jay-Z grew up in the Marcy Houses on the 5th floor. The rapper, known as Sean Carter, worked with Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, to create Bitcoin Academy. It's a set of free courses about money that only people who live in Marcy can take. Number 3, Cabrini Green Homes. Some people think that the Cabrini Green housing complex was constructed on land that is believed to be cursed. Cabrini Green is now located where there used to be a place called Little Hell. The Chicago Tribune says that first German people lived in the area. Later, Irish people also moved there. The Swedish people settled in the area after the Irish left. The Great Chicago Fire in 1871 destroyed the area. The people from Sweden left and were replaced by people from Sicily. The place was already in bad condition, and later on, African Americans who were escaping the Jim Crow laws in the South were permitted to settle there. In 1937, the Chicago Housing Authority was created to help the city's poorest neighborhoods, like Little Hell. During World War II, the city decided to demolish Little Hell and build the Cabrini Green housing projects. Francis Cabrini homes were the first part of the Cabrini Green housing project. They were built in 1942 and had 55 buildings that were 2 or 3 stories tall. They were near Chicago's near north side. These were short buildings. Cabrini Green used to have around 15,000 people living at its busiest time. In 1981, Mayor Jane Byrne went to live in Cabrini Green to show that crime was a big problem in Chicago. The plan to get attention didn't work. She couldn't handle the situation and left after 3 weeks. Members of a gang could make tunnels by breaking through walls to go from one side floor to the other. Gangs would use tunnels to escape when the police arrived. In 1970, 2 police officers were killed at Cabrini Green. According to the Associated Press, the 2 men who committed the crime were released on parole in 2021. Cabrini Green is a public housing project in Chicago that is located near the wealthy areas of Gold Coast and Lincoln Park. Expensive stores and houses were close by, less than a mile away on Michigan Avenue. The scary movie Candyman came out in 1992 and is set in Cabrini Green. The new movie that came out in 2021 is set in the same area as the first one. The slasher film is a good comparison to the scary situation in Cabrini Green. The Cabrini Green housing projects were destroyed by the Chicago Housing Authority in 1995. CBS News says that the final building in the group was destroyed in 2011. Number 4. The Magnolia Projects. The Magnolia Projects, also known as the CJP Public Housing Development, is in Central City, New Orleans. It used to have 1,403 units. The Magnolia Projects were built in 91. They were located between Magnolia Street, Washington Avenue, LaSalle Street, and Louisiana Avenue. In 1955, the project continued further beyond Clara Street. In the 1980s and 1990s, the Magnolia Projects were not taken care of well and became worse like other public housing projects. In the 1980s, there was a big problem with crack cocaine. This caused more people to use drugs, more violence, more crime, and more killings. In 1990, the Housing Authority of New Orleans, HANO, and the New Orleans Police Department worked together to open a police substation in the Magnolia Projects. Their goal was to reduce crime in the area. In 1998, some parts of the Magnolia Projects were destroyed as part of HANO's efforts to improve the project. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina caused flooding in the area where the project was located. At the time, only 144 people lived there, and most of the buildings were empty and surrounded by fences. According to BET, the Magnolia Projects were torn down and replaced with a new development called Harmony Oaks in 2008. The Magnolia Projects had a lot more units than Harmony Oaks. Magnolia had 1,403 units, while Harmony Oaks has only 143. Number 5. Techwood Homes. The Techwood Homes were the first public housing project built in America in 1935. The project was made in Atlanta, Georgia, and it took the place of Tanyard Bottom, which was a poor area known as the Tech Flats. The complex was built to provide cheap housing for 604 families. It was the first housing project funded by the government's housing division of the Public Works Administration. Other housing projects were based on this one. Techwood Homes was in the northwest part of Atlanta, between Coca-Cola's main office and the Georgia Tech campus. When Techwood Homes first opened, only white people were allowed to live there. This continued until 1968. During the time of the civil rights movement, there were quick changes in how people of different races were treated. After 6 years of integration, half of people living in Techwood Homes were black. The government did not give money to Techwood's housing projects, so they became worse. The Techwood Homes were destroyed before the 1996 Olympics. That's all for today's video. We will be right back with more, so don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.